Alright my friends, welcome back to the Bankroll Hippo YouTube channel. This is episode 10 of Coffee and Kernels, where we talk all about the world of video games, movies, TV shows, and all the glorious things that go on within it. Friends, like, comment, and subscribe if you're enjoying these videos and to get in on the fun and enjoy more content. Appreciate you stopping by. Another great show for you today. We're going to talk about 4 different topics. The added talent to the Marvel Avengers video game and the War of Wakanda expansion, about the shocking product that has come out from Valve in the form of the Steam Deck, and review Space Jam: A New Legacy starring LeBron James, Don Cheadle, and other big stars. And then lastly, about the season 1 finale of Loki, which is going to be episode 6, which blew my mind, but I won't keep you waiting. Let's get started. First thing I want to get into is Kratos and Black Panther. Why do I put those two things together? It's because they're going to be played by the same voice actor. That's right, IGN announced that Christopher Judge is going to be voicing King T'Challa in the Marvel Avengers video game. The War of Wakanda expansion pack is coming later this year, and Christopher Judge, with his trademark very deep Kratos voice, is going to be the voice of the Black Panther in this case, which is super exciting. Now, Christopher Judge has a very deep trademark voice. Like I said, in Kratos, he really embodies that and irradiates with a lot of audiences everywhere. But in this case, according to IGN, he had to work with MCU Black Panther film dialect coach Beth McGuire in order to sort of get that higher pitched Wakandan voice. I'll link the full article down in the description below so you guys can read it yourself, but this is what really stuck out to me. He was quoted in the article saying this: "I was fearful of being compared to what Chadwick had so wonderfully done. The only way I could really wrap my hand around it was to not even attempt a voice match, to let my performance stand on its own. I put all that into it, and hopefully people like it." So there's 3 different things I absolutely love about that quote from Judge. First and foremost, adding talent to any title, whether it's movie, video game, TV show, it's never a mistake, and it is always really, really awesome to see because we as the fans get to benefit from it. Secondly, he clearly has a lot of respect and reverence for Chadwick Boseman's performance, which is always excellent to hear and see other industry leaders admiring the work of others as well. And third, and most importantly, the fact that he's trying to meld the character into his own iteration rather than just trying to copy Chadwick Boseman. The one thing I always say is it's always a mistake to try to copy someone else's work, because at the end of the day, there's no one that's going to be better at being you than you. It's always better to add your own DNA and spin onto things rather than try to carbon copy someone else, because the second you start trying to be somebody else, you're automatically coming in second or even worse. I give a lot of mad props to Christopher Judge for wanting and clearly putting his own spin on the character. Alright my friends, so is the addition of Christopher Judge's voice something that's going to get you excited for the upcoming War of Wakanda expansion for Marvel's Avengers? Do you like Marvel's Avengers video game? If so, comment below, let me know whatever your thoughts are. This week, Valve came out with a very exciting product I think that's going to really shake up the video game atmosphere. They've released the Valve Steam Deck, which is, you guessed it, a handheld gaming PC that just starts at $399. When I first heard about this, I wasn't too excited because me, myself, full disclosure, I'm not really a PC gamer. I've always been a console gamer. But I have to say, with the introduction of the Valve Steam Deck, this I think is really going to shake up the handheld gaming industry. And because of the fact that this adds in another major competitor to Nintendo, who just has their Switch within this ecosphere. Let me tell you what the Steam Valve Deck does. Essentially what it is like I said, it's a handheld gaming PC that's going to retail for $399 at its base model. Basically, it is exactly what it sounds like. It is a gaming PC that has a 7-inch touchscreen that you can walk around and play any game at any time from the Steam Deck. Any titles that you own, you can play on there. You can play AAA games. You can play your indie games that you love. Pretty much anything within Steam. And to me, that's just absolutely amazing. Plus, if that's not cool enough, you can dock it to your own PC at home. You can dock it to any monitor that you have. You can dock it to your TV. It's ultra portable and ultra flexible to really fit any situation that you're given, which is just, to me, it's mind-blowing. And especially the fact that you can just use it in and of itself as a PC alone is worth the $400. I'm really surprised that Valve has kept this under wraps as much as they have. I hadn't heard any news up until they announced it about the product at all. So, I mean, could just be me not paying attention. And to me, why do I say this really shakes up the gaming industry? In the world of gaming, where you basically got one tried and true handheld console in the Nintendo Switch, the Nintendo Switch doesn't really have a whole lot of competition, or hasn't had a whole lot of competition since its inception, however many years ago. And now with Valve releasing the Steam Deck, it adds in another option for consumers to go in and have a handheld gaming experience, and a really, really good one to boot. So I'm really excited because it gives us as the consumers more options, and it drives competition. And once you drive competition, you get better titles, you get better deals, you get better games, and everybody at the end of the day genuinely wins. A really good push for the Switch to improve improve its own IP. It's a really good push for Valve to do the same with its library and what have you. To me personally, I'm just excited to see what the large implications of the industry are going to be. Super cool product. I don't know if I'll be getting one myself because, like I said, I am not a PC gamer. I'm a console gamer, but hey, I said the same thing about switching from physical games to just downloadable games from different Xbox libraries and whatnot, so who knows, maybe time will tell. I will say that the Valve Steam Deck is going to be probably one of the most flexible options on the market when it releases later on this year. I'll link an article down in the description below so you guys can view the specs on your own, but I'll just say this about it. It runs at 60 frames per second. It's got about 8 hours of battery life, which is really impressive. Its resolution is at 1280 by 800 pixels. Don't know how that's going to translate if you try to dock it to your TV or your PC or really any other medium, so take that for what it's worth. It also comes installed with Steam 3.0's OS, which is optimized for, of course, playing games, but like I said, this is a PC in and of itself. Download a Windows operating system if you'd like to use that instead. The only major con to this is you'll have to buy a docking station to dock it to a lot of the different formats that I talked about, so that's just something to keep in mind. But having said that, once you have that docking station, you've got the most flexible piece of hardware in the entire industry, so keep that in mind. One thing I do want to point out, in a world that is drifting more slowly to just cloud gaming, like with Xbox come out with their cloud gaming platform, it's going to be really interesting to see how the Steam Deck is going to evolve and adapt in that world. That is a very early conversation that I'm bringing up there, so that'll probably have to be readdressed a couple years down the line. All right, my friends, so are you really excited about the Valve Steam Deck? Are you going to be getting one yourself? Let me know whatever you think. You know where exactly the comment section is. Let me know. Space Jam: A New Legacy is all about LeBron James. It's supposed to take place in the real world near Warner Brothers headquarters in Burbank, California. LeBron James finds himself at odds with his son, Dom, who has taken a liking to things beyond basketball. In this case, it's video games. Dom has a talent in programming and wants to attend an E3 gaming camp rather than go to basketball camp next weekend, thus creating a little bit of conflict. And all the while, an algorithm within Warner Brothers, known as Algorithm in the movie, played by Don Cheadle, wants to bring in LeBron James as the face of Warner Brothers Entertainment. They pitch LeBron the idea. LeBron calls the idea horrible, and Algorithm takes it personally. So, as recompense, he absorbs LeBron and his son Dom into his algorithm. In order to get out of the algorithm, LeBron James has to beat him in a game of basketball, otherwise they're stuck in the algorithm forever. LeBron has to be banished into the world of the Looney Tunes to team up with Bugs Bunny and form a team that can take on Algorithm and his goon squad. And there we have our movie. My overall thoughts on the movie, I would say that this is a mediocre movie overall. However, I did find enjoyment within it. The best way to describe it would be a movie that you take a younger brother, sister, niece, nephew, your own kids, and just go and look for a good time for them. There are plenty of references within the movie that will no doubt appeal to a more adult audience, which is why I say it's fun for the whole family. Let's start off with the cons. What didn't I really like about this movie? Playing off with the cultural references, I think there are way too many pop cultural references in this movie. In fact, there are so many to the point where I kind of got a feeling that it felt like more of a marketing movie by Warner Brothers than anything else. I would say without the pop cultural references, I think this movie would have a hard time standing on its own. If they just stuck with LeBron and him interacting with the Looney Tunes throughout the movie, I think it would have been just fine. Warner Brothers kind of brings in their entire catalog of characters from across all of their different IP into the movie, and it just kind of gets distracting and feels really out of place. For example, at a couple points in this movie, you get crossovers, like I said, from all of Warner Brothers' other titles, including titles that are rated R, and it's a really weird juxtaposition seeing a rated R character in a movie that is definitely geared more towards a younger audience. It's really jarring. And beyond the references, I would think that the dialogue in the movie was pretty poor. It made for the villain having really weak motivations and thus making Algorithm a weak villain. That in no way is Don Cheadle's fault. The dialogue he was given, you can't really work much with that. He used a lot of phrases like, oh snap, which again, I get a kid's movie. The themes throughout the movie were way too familiar and executed in such a way that just didn't really stick for me. The two main themes are, one, being yourself, and also family conflict. For example, in this case, it is father and son being at odds with each other. Both are really positive themes with really positive messages. It's just, like I said, the execution of it just wasn't very strong, and it didn't really make me care much more about the movies. I might be being a little bit too harsh on the movie for this, but there's a couple of points in the movie, I counted 3, where they kind of take a jab at video games as if are lesser for whatever reason, and to me, it's just a really old, idea that kind of took me back to the 90s and 2000s where everyone said, oh my god, video games are bad, they're the devil. And it was really weird because in a world where NBA 2K is a very, very popular basketball game, and this is a movie that surrounds basketball, it felt really weird to take that jab at video games, even though the movie is centered around essentially a video game, and in the real world, an industry that plays off of a video game very well. I just thought that was odd and also really poorly placed. Comes off as old-fashioned and directly contradicts with one of the main messages of the movie. I think the worst part about this movie was the pacing in the second half. In the first half, the movie does a really good job of getting straight to the point and doesn't take too long to get to those meaty parts. However, when you get to the second half, it takes so long to build up to the major points of the film that by the time I got there, I almost didn't even really care because I was just so burnt out from the build-up. It's like it would build up to each like 2 or 3 moments throughout the second half, but it would take a good 20 minutes to get there, and it felt like a lot of time wasting. Like if this movie was an hour and a half rather than an hour 55, I think this would have been an even better movie, but there's just so much unnecessary filler that they had that they could have definitely cut out, and it would have made for a much better experience. Plus, given the genre of the movie, I think an hour and a half would have been a much more appropriate runtime overall. Moving on to what I really liked about this movie, I would say that this movie had a lot of star power behind it, and it can't help but make it more appealing. LeBron James, him being one of the greatest basketball players of all time, Don Cheadle, Zendaya as Lola Bunny, Gabriel Iglesias as Speedy Gonzalez, Diana Taurasi, Damian Lillard, Anthony Davis, Klay Thompson, Sarah Silverman, Steven Yeun, Ernie Johnson, Lil Rel Howery. Stars in this movie, like I said, the star power alone is intriguing enough for me to at least want to give the movie a look, and will probably be the case for a lot of you watching this review as well. The other thing I really liked about this movie was when the Looney Tunes were on screen. This was a case, I think, of Warner Brothers utilizing their greatest strength from the original Space Jam. When you're transported into the cartoon world of the Looney Tunes in this movie, I think that's where the movie is at its strongest, and it's also a ton of fun to watch. Having said that, what's really unfortunate is that the movie kind of just montages really quickly when you're in the world of Looney Tunes. It's probably the shortest part of the movie, which really sucks, because if this would have been elongated as a substitute for all the filler that they have later on in the movie, I think the movie would have been even better. So I really like the Looney Tunes in the movie, and I wish they would have been in it even more. The amount of cultural references just kind of outweighed it, and I think the movie paid the price for it. Lastly, for the positives, I think the movie actually had quite a few good laughs in it. I came into the movie with pretty low expectations, and I didn't expect to laugh at all. However, I would say that there was probably at least 3 or 4 good jokes that at least got me a chuckle, and there's one that even got me to laugh pretty loudly, and I really enjoyed that. I was pleasantly surprised by the time I left the movie. My final verdict, I would say it's 5 out of 10. It's overall a mediocre movie. However, my friends, it's worth seeing. The overabundance of cultural references makes it feel kind of like a marketing film. The themes were pretty familiar and not executed well. The dialogue was pretty weak. The villains' motivations weren't exactly believable either. Having said that, there are some laughs. There's a lot of star power that generates some really good interest. So the Looney Tunes was excellent, and there's fun to be had within this movie for the entire family. So if you're a family with young kids, go ahead and see it. Like I said, won't be totally a film that's very memorable. Friends, so now I ask you, have you seen A Space Jam: A New Legacy? If so, what'd you think of it? You know where the comment section is. Let me know whatever your thoughts. Friends, welcome back to the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel. This is going to be a spoiler session for Loki episode 6. So if you haven't seen season 1 episode 6 of Loki, go ahead, watch it, come back, watch this video. Otherwise, if you don't care about spoilers or you've already seen the episode, welcome to the party. If I had to describe this episode in just a few words, I would say, holy shitballs. This episode was pretty great, and I was not expecting to get this much payoff for the end of this season. We got a lot of character payoff in terms of Loki himself completing his entire arc, I guess you could say, from episode 1 all the way to now. We got the development of his and Sylvie's relationship, and we also got a peek of, or we actually know now, who was behind the TVA, why they did it, and who exactly they are. So overall, I thought the episode was great. Aside from a little bit of meandering towards the first half, I think it made for a really great episode and a nice end to season 1, because as it turns out, in the post-credit scene, we're getting a second season, which totally shocked me. I thought for sure this was just going to lead into another Marvel title. I didn't think Loki would get another season beyond this, but it seems to be the case that this and Falcon and Winter Soldier are going to be getting additional seasons for each. So really pumped. I'm always cool to see other Marvel titles come into fruition. Start off with the completion of Loki's development as a character, going from that narcissistic, power-hungry character who is really, really selfish to a selfless person who is willing to care for others and also think about the greater context of his actions. And it was really satisfying to see, basically to start off the episode, him and Sylvie get to the Citadel beyond the end of time, beyond the void, and they run into Miss Minutes, who basically gives them a message from who behind the TVA is. The message is basically, if you turn around now, you can go back into the timeline and live the ideal lives that you wanted to. So Loki, you could go ahead and you could rule New York City, you could rule the entire universe, you could defeat Thanos if you wanted to. Sylvie, you can go back to where you came from and you could leave, or you could live out the life that you always dreamed of. And Loki, when he's faced with this decision to get all the ultimate power that he would have craved all the way back in episode 1, he declines it because he knows that there's a greater good, thus completing his arc as a character, his growth, his maturity that's been going to fruition all the way from the beginning of the season. So kind of continuing on, this is where the episode starts to meander a little bit, because the build up to finding out the man behind the curtain of the TVA takes a little while. I'll just give it to you straight. It's Kang. They call him He Who Remains. That's who the TVA refers him to. And it's played by Jonathan Majors, and I believe that Marvel's done a good job of keeping this under wraps, because even Jonathan Majors is like, I'm not involved. Turns out it was a lie. He appears in this, and I gotta give it to him. He really crushes it in this episode. His performance, and also Tom Hiddleston's performance, was, I thought, absolutely excellent. They just really brought it, and it's something I really enjoyed watching. It's Loki, Sylvie, and Kang. I'll just call him Kang for the rest of the spoiler talk. They all get to talking about essentially the origins of the TVA, why the TVA came to be, why he's there, how he created the TVA. All those questions are answered, and I had my jaw hitting the floor basically the entire time. Basically, what he reveals is that he, in the year 3000 something, I can't remember, started to study multiverses, and he basically discovered that there's an infinite number of them. And it turns out that at the same time he was studying multiverses, all of his variants in the other universes were doing the same thing. So after a while, they discovered a way to communicate, interact with each other, hence TimPads being created, and then they all will start to work together in harmony in these multiverses. However, not every variation of himself was so pleasant. Some of these variants looked at this as a way to start to rule other timelines and do additional conquest. What he decided to do was he decided to snuff them all out, condense everything just into one timeline, and just call it a day to keep everybody from trying to rule each other. It's kind of strange because in doing so, he kind of rules over every timeline in that respect, so take that for what you will. Once he got scrounged down into one singular timeline, he created the TVA to maintain that timeline so that, as they put it in the first episode, utter chaos wouldn't ensue and everybody would stop trying to rule each other. Essentially, by keeping one timeline straight, it keeps everything a lot more organized, a lot less chaotic. That was essentially his motivation. At the end of this conversation, he basically gives Loki and Sylvie an ultimatum. He's like, all right, well, now that we're here, you have two options. One, you can kill me, in which that will result in all of the variations in the universe occurring and then thus creating a giant multiverse once more. The whole cycle will just kind of repeat again until eventually he will be back into his position. He will be back at the Citadel, controlling one central timeline, almost like a reincarnation. Option 2 is that Loki and Sylvie can spare his life and they can just take over the TVA to do with what they please. The way he put it was that he was tired and that he's lived millions and millions of years, which makes sense because he controls all of time and literally writes all of time. So Loki and Sylvie have a decision to make, and wouldn't you know it, Loki and Sylvie are on each side of this coin. Loki, like I said earlier, he now understands his actions have consequences for the larger world, while Sylvie is still kind of bent on revenge. So Loki is on the side of they should just take over for Kang because they can use their knowledge to maybe transform the TVA into something for good. On the other hand, Sylvie is just kind of a little apprehensive because maybe she thinks that Loki is just saying that because he wants the throne, he wants the power, and she still wants her revenge. Her vengeance is still on her mind. And I guess that kind of reveals her arc a little bit more because her entire life has been sort of ruined by Kang. She doesn't have that free will, and she's still really, really upset by that. And Loki, he acknowledges that, but he says at the end of the day, this is bigger than just you and me, that we're talking about a whole entire universe of people hanging in the balance with our decision. We should really think about it. So then they are at odds, they have this little fight, and this is where, like I said, this is where Tom Hiddleston really brings it in the scene because Sylvie has her scythe to his neck, and he's like, Sylvie, please, I don't want to hurt you. You can hurt me if you want, but I just want to be with you, and that's all that matters. They have their moment, they smooch a little bit, and it kind of completes the arc of the relationship and how they feel about each other, which is they are I would say, in love. Sylvie uses this opportunity to use the Tim pad, toss Loki into it, and send him back to the TVA, while she executes her side of the story, takes the scythe right into Kang's chest, and now creates this entire new multiverse. So it was a really big holy shit moment for me. I can't believe Sylvie actually went through with it, and she did it with pleasure too. She took that thing and just went right into his chest. Kang says really something interesting right before she does it. He goes, I'll see you around, or something to that degree. And it makes sense, right? Because he said eventually he's going to be back into this position again. It's like a whole reincarnation, because by creating this multiverse of timelines, eventually he's going to run into his own version again, and thus the cycle will repeat. It's a little convoluted in that respect, and I think it might take a couple of watches of this episode to really grasp it. But just look at it this way: by Sylvie's actions, it's essentially creating this giant multiverse leading into the other Marvel titles, and thus creating a whole slew of mess variants and etc. So everything's just gone chaotic. Now, what really, really blew my mind at the end of this episode is we cut now to Loki after Sylvie essentially stabs Kang in the chest. And Loki, he knows what's happening. He knows what Sylvie's done. So he runs to find Mobius and B-15 to explain what is going on. And they can see through their Tim pads that all these different variants are starting to branch. All the timeline is branching. So they're calling out all the troops and everything. Loki runs. He starts yelling to Mobius and B-15 like, hey, like, you know, all these variants have been created. We can't stop them. And they both say, who are you? You're an analyst. What area are you from? And it begs to us as the audience. It's like, holy shit, by Sylvie killing Kang in that moment and creating all these different timelines, she sent Loki to another timeline in which he hasn't met Mobius and B-15, and also in which Kang is the timekeeper and the only timekeeper. He doesn't have those puppets like he did in the timeline that we've seen. So it's essentially starting the process over again, and it's like, oh my god, it was just so mind-blowing to see Mobius and B-15 not recognize Loki at all. It was just, it was crazy weird. So the episode sort of ends there overall. I know I didn't really touch too much on the rest of the TVA, like for example Mobius and Ravonna, because honestly between them not really too much happens in this episode. Mobius confronts Ravonna, and Ravonna essentially leaves to find what she calls free will, but now that Sylvie's reset a whole bunch of different timelines, that kind of is rendered moot. So Ravonna's payoff is a little bit not so cathartic in this case. On the other side of that coin, B-15 exposes to all the other TVA agents who Ravonna actually is and what her past was. Turns out she was a high school principal in this case. But like I said, at the end, it doesn't really matter because all these different variations and branches have been happening now. So it only makes a difference in the old timeline, but now there's a whole bunch of them. So it gets really confusing overall. So like I said, there are a ton of implications for what Sylvie has done, and I'm really curious to see how it's going to end up playing out, especially in future Marvel titles and in season 2 of Loki. I'm also really curious to see now what will happen with Loki and Sylvie, because obviously they care for each other a lot. And will they ever get their moment again, or is the timeline going to be too scrambled for them to find each other once more? Who knows? The one thing I'm really there's a couple of weaknesses I think this episode has that I'm really bummed out about. First, we don't see Mobius get on a jet ski. I was really hoping for that. And also, we don't really understand why Kang created the 3 artificial robot timekeepers to run the TVA in the first place. That's not really elaborated on, and it doesn't really make a whole ton of sense in my mind, especially at the end of the episode when Loki is in that new timeline and it's just Kang's statue and that's it. The TVA knows exactly who Kang is and runs the show and why. Well, I guess I can't say that definitively. I'm sure they don't know why he runs the show, but they just know that he runs the show. So it's like, why did he need the 3 timekeepers, the fake timekeepers in the first place? Was it to conceal who all the TVA agents were, their past lives? That's not really clear, and I wish they would have just explained that a little bit more. Other than that, I think they did a really great job explaining what Kang's purpose was, why he did what he does, and also the implications of Sylvie's actions, and also wrapping up Loki's character arc for just this season and seeing his growth. And overall, on the series, or I should say on the season, I think this was a good season. Of course, it had its ups and downs. I'd say the best episode was probably the first one. The second, fourth, and last episode are all, I'd say, good or great, and then the third and fifth episode are probably the weakest. I'll say the third episode was probably the weakest overall. It was really cool to see Loki go from this character who was very narcissistic, very selfish, to this person who is able to look at his consequences and the larger implications of them. So really, really fun to watch and really cool to see him and Sylvie get through their journey together as well. And also Mobius was really charming throughout this season. I hope he's in season 2 because that would make it so much better. Owen Wilson absolutely crushed. I think that about does it for my thoughts on this episode and the season overall. Like I said, it's really great, and I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in future Marvel titles. And mad props to Jonathan Majors and Tom Hiddleston for bringing it in this last episode, because their performances, they just, oh man, it got me right in the chest. So my friends, what did you make of Loki episode 6, or what did you make of the entire season? Whatever you think, you know where the comment section is, let me know. All right, my friends, so that'll do it for this episode of Coffee and Kernels. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. Like, comment, and subscribe to get in on more content and enjoy the fun. Once again, I've been Bryce. This has been the Bankrupt Hippo YouTube channel. And until next time, have a great day.